Hi, folks. I trust you've had a great week. Everything's going well for you, wherever you are. Anyway, I was compelled to share a article that I bumped into this morning from somebody I follow because it really resonated with me, and it ticked a lot of boxes, and it reminded me of things I've been thinking for a long time. Not that what I think just pops into my head from my beautiful, talented homunculus and informs me of my brilliant ways. My thoughts, ideas, and feelings are extremely influenced by everything. My gut microbiome and the stuff I read and my friends and my background and education. You know the drill, right? So I'm not pretending, but sometimes things hit me and I want to share it. So I do it because I'm nuts. What can I say? Anyway, this is my Evernote here, and you can see I have 3 of these saved. I don't know why, but Energy Descent Realism Part 2, that was good. A piece on Julian Assange and Truth Out, which was good. Patrick Lawrence, I always follow him. And he was commenting on the Biden-Trump debate, which wasn't a debate. I mean, come on. The CNN questions were idiotic. The non-moderators are idiots anyway. I can't stand those people. They asked a few lowball questions that nobody answered. I mean, Biden tried but couldn't, and Trump just talked about how immigrants are destroying America over and over again, and everything's horrible, and it's all the Democrats' fault. So that was it, one talking point. They didn't discuss anything of importance, and so it's really just performative. It's performance art, it's entertainment, it's commercialized, commodified BS. I don't even think it rises to the level of propaganda or marketing or public relations, because it really has no purpose other than to, make people look over here while all of this other stuff is going on over there, keeping you distracted from what really matters, so that all these disenfranchised, unhappy people from the whole spectrum of cultural and philosophic and political points of view don't get really pissed off and just start a revolution or something. And I don't think they will. I was watching this TV show called Owning Manhattan. I thought it was pretty good as a reality TV show goes. And I follow these things because they're interesting from some kind of cultural anthropological point of view. No, I'm kidding. I like getting entertained too. So I found it kind of entertaining. And of course, you're talking about elites buying extremely expensive property in Manhattan. And, it's like, oh, it's so cheap. It's only, $150,000 a month to rent, or, $20 million. They had one property for $250 million, the tallest penthouse in the world. Anyway, you can watch that if you want. But meanwhile, most people can't afford to live there. So it's global capital that owns Manhattan. And the few people that live there in some rent control or legacy digs or in some hellhole neighborhood, they stay there because it's their home, where their people are. And normal people can't really live there. Apparently, if you worked in St. Louis for a New York City firm, you could be saving a lot of money because the cost of living in St. Louis is so much lower than Manhattan. Anyway, New York City is an amazing city, but, it's not for you, my friend. Not for you. You gig economy nomad can come here to Caldas Torreña and rent an apartment and saved tens of thousands of dollars and invested in stocks and bonds and all the stuff that's invested in the MIC, these index funds and whatnot that are arming the world to protect us all and guarantee our freedom and democracy and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, I don't want to go on and on, but I just opened up this piece here. It's called Hoi Polloi Are Sick by Simplicious from the Dark Futura group on Substack. And of course, these people are not what normal people look at or read. I think if people do read anything, like sometimes I watch ABC News and it's interesting just to see what the news is pushing. Some cop kills a kid with a toy gun. We've seen that before. Heat waves, 115 degrees in New Orleans, floods, people getting washed out in riptides, on and on. And then you have the American Strong piece where some uplifting thing at the very end of the story. Also, it was interesting following all the usual suspects at the New York Times and Washington Post and all the pundits on TV talking about the train wreck of a faux debate that happened. Suddenly, they're all saying Biden has to step down. It's such a racket, It's such a con job, but people pay attention to it. So that's what they know. And they're not going to pay attention to things like this. And even if they did, what would they do with it? How would we? This is a great article, but there's nothing in it about what do we do to shift it. As I've said a million times when I was riding my bicycle or whatever, culture is a difficult thing to change and shift. You just can't do it easily. How it's done even, it's very hard to even think about. Social science is more complex than rocket science. And some people would say social science isn't a science. So I don't know how you shift it, really. I think that in this one article here where the guy's talking about pain, right? You have to get to a certain low point before something new can come out of the ashes. The phoenix rises up from the ashes. So I think this particular predicament we're in is on a crash and burn trajectory. I noticed that Boeing copped a plea deal for all of their shenanigans. So it's a slap on the wrist for publicly supported corporations. You privatize the gains and socialize the losses, as it were. So anyway, they get away with murder, no problem. And of course, they're, all the international courts and the UN are saying that Boeing's one of the companies that supports what's going on in the Middle East. You can't even say the G word or type it anywhere because you'll be censored. If I put something up that has the G word, the G side, or other bugaboo words on my Facebook page, they get censored. We had to take it down. They don't even tell you what they took down. They just say we had to take it down. But generally, I find out it's stuff like that. So if you want to learn something that's better researched with better references and better sources and so on, that you can dig into and really learn something about what's going on in the world, you will be pushed off to ABC News or some idiots on MSNBC going on for an hour and a half about nothing. It all amounts to the same thing. So everybody put these candidates up, for example, and now they're all freaked out that they're such idiots. Well, the whole system supports them. Why is that? I don't know. Who's in charge? Well, capital's in charge. That's an abstract point to most people, but, whatever. So anyway, I want to go through this because it's quite interesting. So Hoi Polloi Are Sick by Simplicious Dark Futura. So, historic political divisions pitting one extreme against another, we're dragged along in a frenzy of misdirected aggression. The wisdom of the crowds replaced with teeming madness. I like some of his turns of phrases. I'm just going to read what I highlighted and comment because it's a long article and you'll get bored if I read the whole thing. So I hope you'll read it. And I posted it on Facebook, Globe Hackers. You can find it there. You can look for him on Substack. So one of the simplest ideals we've adopted in the heat of struggle is that the government is solely responsible. It's the problem, right? And Reagan famously said, government is the problem. So it's not just the system that's rotten, it's society itself. So I talk about system this and systemic that and whatnot, but I also talk about culture. I just feel it intuitively because I've lived in various cultures, and some of the things I appreciate about cultures is that they're a culture. They're defined. They're well identifiable. They have their own, traditions and so on that one can appreciate. And they have a certain aesthetic, a certain moral and ethical quality about them. So he says that via their social engineering projects have created or at least exacerbated every fundamental social ill now spitting up like pus from a boil. So he's talking about the whole thing just deteriorating. And people have felt this. That's why there's so much, reaction to a lack of meaning and so on. The problem is not just the red herring of evil government, but the culture. But that culture is intrinsically tied with governance by the link of civic virtue, and civic virtue has died because our culture has been poisoned beyond rehabilitation. So you have this idea of civic virtue, and I don't think many people think about that anymore. And he really gets into it down here in the article. There's a word here I didn't know. Even if you were to clear the slate of techno and bureaucracy, you'd be left with the stupefied, degenerate masses too gormless to be ruled justly and virtuously. Gormless. I didn't know what that word meant, so I looked it up. So gormless is lacking intelligence, sense, or understanding, foolish. And I'm always talking about the fools because I think these leaders that we choose because we don't know what to do or how to choose are fools. They're foolish people. A new piece by Charles Hugh Smith, he quotes down here, capitalism and social order both require a moral foundation, which in a free society takes the form of civic virtue. And you go way back to the pre-Socratics on this. It's nothing new. It is the responsibility of every citizen who is able to contribute to the social capital that serves us all to do so, not in response to an oppressive state, but out of their own free will. So somehow you've been brought up to think that civic virtue is an important aspect of life. I think in some ways, when I fell in love with Japan, I fell in love with the culture and the civic virtue that I felt there. I was a free boy, a sunny boy from the West, but I had grown up in a Catholic culture that had more constraints, more social mores, and so on. And going to Japan and seeing the rules and how they made sense and the aesthetic of it all was very enticing and attractive to me. And I benefited from it. Of course, I was still a free boy. I was not brought up to be a Japanese person, but I appreciated it a lot. So the founding fathers understood this and feared the decay of civic virtue as a threat to democracy. This is one reason why many of those active in the early decades of the American experiment favored restricting voting to the class of citizenry who had the biggest stake in maintaining the nation's stock of social capital, the landed and commercial elites. And we see that in every society. And I wonder, does any powerful culture or society really care about the plebs and proles that much? And, I used to think maybe we should make people in the United States take civic courses online and ace them as part of their responsibility of being citizens and as a litmus test for their right to vote. And people would say, well, that won't work because you have people who can't read, who are innumerate or poorly educated. But you can design a way to alleviate that basic education, reading, writing, and arithmetic, and help people who are behind be able to take a test like that and understand, the laws and the Constitution and all of that. Anyway, it'd be hard, but I think it's important. But, there's a certain class of people that know how things work. And so they run the show because you're just too stupid. Instead, we have this performative gerrymandering democracy, corrupt, that makes you feel like you're voting for something when really the opportunity to vote for someone who would actually look after your interests is not there. You're given certain people to vote for. You can vote for Trump or you can vote for Biden. And somehow that's supposed to make a difference in your life, and it never does. So he goes on to say, fellow critics across the ideological spectrum understood that civic virtue is the glue that binds democracy and a free economy. Once civic virtue and the responsibility to contribute to the nation's social capital are gone, both democracy and the free economy enter terminal decline. So here we have social capital. Oh my God, social. What's that? So, but Smith focuses on the economic side of things and the lost sense of a common good when it comes to financial morality. He uses a comparison of private equity with old money to demonstrate how things have become uprooted and financialized to the point where only the bottom line matters, a nod to true stakeholder capitalism, gutted out by a detached transnationalist monetary ethos. So I'm riding my bicycle. I'm always thinking about this. Global capital, financialization, labor arbitrage, all these things where finally the operational ethic is just about, the bottom line and nothing else matters. And of course, after a while, when we live in this kind of a world, we almost have to become capitalists because money is the only thing that counts. You're not going to have friends without money. You're not going to have anything to do without money. You're not going to have any hobbies without money. You're not going to have a house without money. And you're just stuck, so you need to fall into this culture just to have a decent life. So down here, civic virtue again. Civic virtue is often conceived as the dedication of citizens to the common welfare of each other, even at the cost of their individual interests. So, imagine people willfully signing up for World War I and World War II. They know, they have a fairly clear idea that they have a high chance of getting killed if they're in combat, not if they're in rear echelon duties. But there are lots of ways people sacrifice for one another. It makes sense, but at a large scale, when things become so commodified and abstracted, that's another thing. You listen to people discussing socialism from a Marxist perspective, and for most people in the world, we can't even go there. That's Satan. Nobody will engage materialism in that context or whatever. That's another thing. But I think it's worthwhile to understand these different perspectives if you're going to have any ability to imagine something else. And for most people in the States who are fairly wealthy, they don't really care. I mean, you have record 4th of July travel, and people are upset because their flights are being canceled because of the weather, and people are driving all over the place. And, it's just gleeful joy for so many people in the States that you can't expect them to think that there's anything wrong. It's just like the culture wars and this and that. It's all nonsense. Life is good. Look at the stock market. So by active, it is meant that one contributes to these surroundings in a way that takes a role in improving, maintaining their health, etc., based on one's reciprocal observations. So, yeah, people have to participate. And obviously, if you were going to be a part of your democracy, you would have to participate. So you would have to get together with people, and you would have to, tell your leaders what it is you're thinking and what it is you want and so on. It's a big responsibility, and you'd have to spend some time during the day constantly educating yourself and thinking about how you could participate. So we used to, have Shriners and things like that. So on some level, people were getting together and doing their civic duties or whatever. Okay, continually improving the conditions of one's social milieu. So you have this idea that you can, improve things. So progressive in that sense. How can we make this work better? Not just a nicer iPhone, but, sewage system and energy grid and whatever, the roads. And I am not a big car fan, so I love public transportation, but I understand I live in the countryside and I need an automobile. But if we could make it more efficient and not spend so much energy and materials on infrastructure for automobiles, I think it'd be better for everybody. I think that would be an improvement in people's lives, but a lot of people would disagree with that. We see small pockets, of course, special interest groups and the political vanguards of various functions attempting to impose their ideologies for what they would consider a beneficial purpose. But do citizens as a whole any longer imagine themselves intrinsic to a close-knit social system? For that to be prevalent, a country or community must march in formation to the beat of a shared dream in the form of some kind of mythos. And obviously, any history of any place, you're going to find that, whether it's Nazi Germany or classical Greece, there's going to be that mythos there. The American dream of the post-World War II era comes to mind, though it can be argued it was a ahistorical apocrypha of sorts, a nostalgic fetishization of what we imagine to be simpler, idealized times, which in actuality were just as multivariate, as fractured as today. Yeah, so we often talk about that, right? What's the American dream? It's just a story, apocrypha. It's nostalgia, right? I mean, throw a dart at the timeline and tell me how good it was and for who. In the 1930s, for example, the 1920s, 1910s, whatever, 1950s. I mean, we have these good decades every once in a while, and then they fall apart a bit. And what's taken along? What goes with it? What continuity is there when you have, the Weathermen in the 60s blowing up things and the Black Panthers? And that's a reaction to something. What are they on about, these Black Panthers? Oh my God, why black people having guns? No, this is terrible. But what are the reasons behind that? What are the causes of their perturbations, or What caused the disturbance? What are the causes of it? It's just the weather, man, acts of God. It happens. It's cyclical. It happens all the time throughout the history of the world, man. I mean, asteroids hit the Earth and they're extinction events. There's nothing you can do about it. But there are things we can do about certain things. So the American dream was in large part a post hoc construction like all other romanticized eras before it. So you look back and you create a narrative and then you pine for it and you write books every single decade about the decline of the West and so on. Furthermore, the very independence of spirit, somewhat counterintuitively, fostered community, which is the ideological counter to today's soulless globalization. The only independence known today is the personal kind, in practice defined by spurning society, community, and individuals around you to carry the torch for some abstracted universal ideals. That's a pretty nice turn of phrase there. Because we've all been liberated by postmodernity's social triumphs, the very idea of conforming to any even remotely larger group dynamic feels like an assault on our truest selves, as inculcated into us, of course. The political divisions imposed on society by the elite have degraded the sense of community. Yeah, so what are you fighting for? What are you trying to project on Instagram, if not aping what's been programmed into you through the machinations of your social milieu and so on? Of course. But there's nothing solid there that you can really, really grasp hold of and say, this makes sense. This is who I am. This is what we are. This story, this mythos is describing our feeling towards life and towards each other and whatnot. One common theme I noticed was the idea of a strange social closing up, a guardedness, or even avoidance of neighbors. And I see that everywhere. And in the expat community here in Portugal, I see it as well. It's like everybody's on pins and needles. What if that guy is like pro-choice or something? Or what if he likes Trump or who knows what? But, you mention anything, you can't just have a fun, free, open-ended conversation about ideas, thoughts, and feelings because everybody is so afraid that, oh no, they're those kind of people. There's no connection really. So you run back to your home or apartment and you turn on the internet and dive back into your bubble and avoid everybody altogether because it might be uncomfortable. You might have an uncomfortable conversation. You can't just say, hey man, what do you mean by that? Are you a this, that, or the other thing? And if you are, what do you mean by that? And how did you arrive at that? And let's talk about it. Well, I don't feel that way. I'm a little bit different, but it's okay. I still like you. We can still have a beer or a lunch or something, or play tennis or golf or whatever, go fishing. It's like, I only go with my people. I mean, there can be a plurality of thoughts, ideas, and feelings and still have a strong cultural identity. But he gets into this later. So their communities felt more connected in the 80s or 90s he's talking about. So yeah, 80s and 90s. But I remember the 60s and 70s as well. And of course, we didn't have all the distraction from social media and other things. We literally had to get together and deal with one another. And it was harder to avoid people we didn't agree with. They were everywhere. And you took it with a grain of salt. And generally in the 70s and 80s, I was feeling like, I'm just learning from this person. They're different. I've never read that book. I don't know what they're talking about. So I'll just see what I can learn from it. And they're still cool people. I love playing basketball with them. Your Tai Chi is good, brother. Real good. I'm going to hang out with you. So now they say in the same neighborhoods, no one says hello or talks to each other. The sense of commonality replaced with a growing sense of enclosure, mistrust, standoffishness, a kind of paranoia and cynicism growing like weeds from the neglected sidewalks and untended yards. So one of the reasons why I liked my life in Hong Kong and here in Portugal is because I don't experience this. People are much more open and willing to talk about stuff. They may, at the end of the day, think you're a nutcase or, you're not I don't like your politics or whatever. But they're friendly. And if you're friendly and kind, I may have few friends, but friendliness is valuable. Politeness, friendliness, kindness, just the ability to engage in a simple conversation with somebody. And if you want to go somewhere else, you can push the boundaries a little bit. I always do. And so I think a lot of people don't get me, but they see I'm smiling and I'm not threatening. So I don't think they hold it against me that much. Anyway, I'm too old to run around trying to be popular nowadays, but I appreciate the openness and connectedness of the people here. So when before we may have waved at a neighbor, engaging in chit-chat over weather or the ball game, now we may simply pull our hat tighter over our eyes, give a curt nod while avoiding eye contact for fear they may be one of them. A hostile from the other side of the spectrum, the politico-cultural divide, maybe a pro or an anti-vaxxer, a Democrat or conservative, a pro-choice or abortionist, or a transphobe ad nauseum. So I had a visit with a friend of mine who was sailing through, and we have different views on a lot of things, and really different. I mean, but we amuse each other. We like each other. We know that we care for one another and respect one another. And so we can tease each other and kid each other and listen to each other and have exasperated conversations and still have a laugh, really have a good time. And one of the guys on the boat was more of a conservative type dude who fancied himself like a nomad sailor. He's not. But he had no sense of humor. And, you could see immediately if you said a certain word or phrase, you could just see him react to it like, oops, red flag. Not sure about this guy. Not sure what to think of him. It's not this willingness to get to know you. It's like one red flag, that's it, So can I see your Facebook, please, before we get together? Because I want to make sure, I need data on you. I need to do some research before we even sit down and start to talk, because you might not be my type. There's no sense of the adventure of getting to know somebody, and understanding people are complex, and you can disagree with them in certain ways, but still love them. It's like, it's just none of that. So just think of the uncanny irony. The dream was once to work and toil all your life to attain those material trappings of Americana. Now it's turning into toiling to accumulate the funds necessary to escape the self-same degenerative ideal of Americana. The people have lost purpose in life. They've lost all sense of compassion and sympathy for one another. And I've been saying this for decades. It's like the main thing that you get when you find some real connection with someone is sympathy. It's simpatico. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you have a feeling of sympathy for someone. I like the Spanish word simpatico. Doesn't mean totally the same, but there's a connection there of compassion and a willingness to engage. So the first, mostly stemming from the depraved and unrestrained excesses of immorality, the Weimar 2.0 redux we've been sinking knee deep into. So he's talking about Weimar, Germany. You know, there was a lot of fun before, in the 30s, Nazi Germany descended into madness and violence. So these comprise the litany of well-known issues, the runaway promiscuity and social debasement as supercharged by a culture exclusively promoting toxic filth in the form of music, film, modern art, etc. I don't know where he's going with the music, film, modern art, and so on, but there is a certain genre of music, even just canned, boringly produced commercial pop or whatever, that I find filthy. But, you know, film, the violence, the sex, everything, it's just so over the top now that we're desensitized to it. So you can't put up an article about the G in the Middle East because it shows violence, but you can turn on Netflix and just watch people dismembering each other, all manner of grotesque depravity. And you have these streaming sites where you can sit in front of a camera all day doing whatever you want, and these sex streaming sites where you just stay online all day doing naughty little things in front of a camera for an audience all day long. On and on and on. And, you know, you go to some countries that have more constraints and the subways are clean. And you go to places that are marked by the desire for American freedom. And basically, what you have is people who have nothing better to do than, you know, destroy the beauty of their neighborhood by painting all over it. And then we would say, we would commodify that, turn that into fine art, or, you know, like Banksy or something. I'm not saying Banksy is bad, but, you know, this guy's a great street artist. And there is good street art, and street art can be promoted and curated and critiqued and appreciated and enjoyed. But there's a point where, you know, from the upper classes all the way down, you can just degenerate into a tasteless situation. There's no accounting for taste. I get that, but I don't know. These are issues that can theoretically be solved with the right people in charge, but are now so deeply rooted, it would take far more than simply installing some idealized populist leader. So I'm not sure about what he means by people in charge, but, you know, obviously there are people who have taste or have the ability to manage or who understand how things work and so on. And when they're in charge, things tend to do better. So figures like Larry Flint and Hugh Hefner are now embedded in the American psyche as paragons of the so-called freedom and liberation at the heart of Western democracy, which America is said to be the champion of. To excise such deeply buried thorns from America's flesh is no easy task. So, you know, wearing the leisure suit in the 70s and having sideburns and the dry look with your hair and, you know, reading Playboy magazine, all that. It's a thing. People are happy, you know, people have, ex-hippies have talked about, you know, Haight-Ashbury and some of the more damaging aspects of the drugs and the free sex and everything. But people get through it, you know, but there is a price to be paid for that. And I don't know how you know, is the answer the church or something? He's got an answer at the end, but it's interesting. So Californian lawlessness, riots, an entire generation taught entitlement and the total lack of social mores. Can't really argue with that. And none of them can be remedied with the instant cure-all of simply overthrowing the government or putting in some new leader. That's a fact. I think anyway. So go down here. Some may bring up Weimar as a comparison, noting that Germany was able to rapidly bootstrap itself in a mere decade after a political revolution of sorts. But Germany was ultimately a demographically uniform state compared to the US, which is quickly devolving into South Africa or Brazil levels of demographic dispersion, with races taught to hate each other by the political elite. At that. So, and again, this has nothing to do with racism. It's just a fact that it becomes so chaotic, and then on top of all that, the elites are telling you to hate, the leaders are telling you to hate each other. And Weimar, as a comparison, we have to look at what happened there, because we can't say it wouldn't happen in the United States, or it isn't happening. And also, before World War II, there were lots of Nazis in the United States. It was a fairly mainstream position in a lot of circles. And the idea that we were all of one political philosophy, and it was the good one, and there was nobody else doing anything or thinking anything differently, is just wrong. So a change in government could do next to nothing in undoing the damage. And I mean, we see that over and over again. And change in what? It's still the same thing. If you don't address all of these socio-cultural and economic issues head on, you're not going to get it. And normal people aren't going to do that. They don't have the time, the inclination, desire, or will to do it. It's much easier to sit back and complain. It's so much more fun. I mean, people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, that's their whole political capital is based on that, just complaining about the enemy. So many writers on the rightosphere haplessly promote the reversion back to one cultural ideal or another, the Hellenic virtues, philosophical milestones, vitalist revivals, etc. But instead of a pointless exercise of converting America into some sort of bastardized ancient Sparta, it would probably be more practical to treat the symptoms in reverse, rather than imposing a set of new, unwieldy social mores. Work towards eliminating the most damaging ones, then let flower what may. And this is probably one of the crux of this whole article for me. It's like, get rid of all the really nasty stuff that we can all agree is bad. Maybe a lot of people can agree that smoking is bad for your health, so you might want to quit. That's a stupid example, but anyway. And then see what comes, see what flowers after you get rid of all the rot, the pathological elements. We don't even know there's a pathology, and we can't recognize it. So obviously we can't get healthier. And most people think that they're already gods, all that because of their status or their possessions or their money or whatever. So if we uproot the diseased weeds and give some time for the soil to regain health, it may then surprise you in finding its own more natural path forward. The problem is Americans suffer from a paradoxical sense of historical vanity when it comes to anything remotely associated with the hallowed concept of liberty. So libertarianism bugs me. I always say flee dumb and amok assy, because I don't think people understand what liberty and freedom is and the responsibilities these ideas entail. America's obsession with liberty has paralyzed the nation from any consideration of a heavy hand in extirpating the most destructive of modernity's tendencies. But we're not North Korea, they plea, while society decays around them in ways that would gall actual North Koreans. So again, you're not a North Korean, you don't want to be, but you don't know how they feel about being North Korean. And people hate Putler and hate Russians, but they don't know how it feels to be a Russian. And the West's behavior has managed to make Russian people even more patriotic and more excited about being Russian. And it has created an axis, a real axis, alliance of people opposed to NATO and the West and American empire. They did a really good job at creating what wasn't there in the first place, but what they've said was there all along. So it seems to me that the business model is the military industrial complex and the markets that you don't participate in, and the players that play with the markets, the market makers, and those kinds of people. The issue is liberty of all kinds is associated with the one thing that Americans feel distinguishes them from every other nation. It's the thing which makes them unique, special, the one indispensable nation. They've got a bloody statue of it, for heaven's sakes. So, no. Planet of the Apes. So to adulterate liberty itself would be to cut out the very essence of what makes the country great, or so it goes. So he talks about, I get it. I myself am quite wary of slippery slope that follows eliminating certain natural rights and civil liberties, because where does it stop? Go too far and you can get carried away, pruning every shoot and stem of potential danger until inadvertently sliding into full-blown white Sharia. So, that's your Handmaid's Tale, right? White Sharia law. Though there's a mite of irony in that the Brownists and Puritans who founded the country themselves were not exactly far from that in moral observance, not to speak of the Quakers. The Pilgrims enforced strict morality codes against gambling, drinking, skimpy dressing, etc. Certainly, I don't suggest going so far in that direction, but merely remind of the fact that talk of liberty as the basis of American values is somewhat nuanced and perhaps even misunderstood. And people forget that. How do we reconcile honoring these sacred foundations of liberty and acknowledging that malign actors have gamed the system in totally subverting the country's culture to the point of terminal corrosion? And when I think of the players, I'm thinking about these people who really don't give a damn about anything except their position in the game. And they play with an elite clique of people. And it's subverting the country's culture for sure. The ones who landed at Plymouth Rock before them were in fact fleeing what they believed to be moral deterioration of Europe. In Europe, right? So they wanted to get away so they could maintain their culture. Again, I'm not necessarily proposing to turn back to Puritan times outright, but certain cultural cancers may have to be forcibly cut out. And obviously, if there is a pathology, you may not think there is. Anything about the culture is pathological. But if there are pathologies, you have to deal with them. And if they're cancerous, they grow very quickly and can take over the whole system and kill it. So basically, at the end of the day, you have civilization, everything that you valued, the good, all the goodness of it, and potential in it, destroyed by the cancer. So that's the train wreck I'm talking about when you accelerate towards the granite wall the size of the Himalayas and just obliterate everything. At some point, then the pain becomes unbearable. Everything breaks down. you have the population crash, and then maybe that soil, that new thing can come up. But do you really have to kill everything to get there, to become healthy? Or is there some way we can pump the brakes, as Jamie Wheel and other people have alluded to? So he goes into this. I got to keep going here. That doesn't make it illegal to. Oh yeah, he talks about this law in Russia, right? They may say it's illegal or deterred or punishable to promote LGBTQ in the media and so on. But you can go to gay bars in Moscow, right near the Kremlin. So they're not making the behavior in and of itself illegal as it was in England during Oscar Wilde's time. So on June 27, at an International League forum in St. Petersburg, Deputy Minister of Justice Vukolov took the initiative to recognize the ideology of child-free, or in other words, voluntary refusal to bear children, as extremist. The arguments are quite simple. In a number of aspects, this movement is similar to LGBT, already banned in Russia, and is promoted by the same companies. Therefore, a ban on child-free people also naturally suggests itself. Already on June 28th, this topic reached the State Duma, which came out with approval of the initiative, and prominent advocates of traditional values, such as the well-known Deputy Molinov, spoke out especially ardently in support. So what does this all mean? That, you're not free to not have children? No, it doesn't mean that. That doesn't make it illegal not to have kids, but rather to actively promote the child-free lifestyle to the masses as a sort of social pollutant. So this is reminiscent of what goes on in Florida and other states in the United States, where people are like, look, okay, you've got your, LGBTQ, you have gender issues, all this kind of stuff. All right, that exists. I'm willing to go there and say that exists, and we want to learn about it and be tolerant and understand that part of our society, those people in our society, and so on and so forth. But we don't want to have it rammed down our throats, so critical theory or critical race theory or postmodernism or neo-Marxism, they get all hysterical about it because they think that any discussion of the subject is having it rammed down their throats. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about understanding something that's real and, facing it, understanding it, and having that be a part of the educational curriculum. And in other states now, in Oklahoma, you have to teach the Bible and the Ten Commandments. And that kind of goes against the separation of church and state and freedom of worship and all that, because now you're telling people that this is more important than anything else. Instead of focusing on the complex and difficult issues of our time, we're going to put the Bible out there and, and say that that's the answer to all our prayers and to social ills is just teaching the Bible. And my God, and then people are all hysterical about science and scientism. You can see how this gets so convoluted. So you need people to rationally and carefully and intelligently think these things through and say, no, it's not that we're condemning it or making it illegal or anything like that. We're just saying we don't want to have this, marketed to our culture. Every culture is like that. You have some do's and don'ts. So, if you're a Mormon or a Hasidic Jew or something, you have more rules. So, they can be beautiful or not, depending on where you're coming from. So for existence, advertisements would not be allowed to praise or glorify the single independent lifestyle widespread in the West. China has curtailed tattoos, effeminate men, or decadent hip hop culture from being highlighted or otherwise glorified on TV, to likewise keep harmful mental influences from penetrating society's collective psyche. So the fact that you don't have a lot of TV, like in the United States now on Netflix, HBO, all these shows, you have to have LGBTQ represented. You have to have homosexual relationships and all that, because you're trying to normalize it, to hopefully to get rid of the irrational fear of people who are different, a minority in the society. And so you're representing these things, or you have African, black African Cleopatra or something, because you want to be fair and so on. And there's a backlash, a reaction to that, because it can go too far. At some point, no, sorry, historically it's not like that. And yes, there was homosexual sex in ancient Rome, but it wasn't like it was promoted. It wasn't. There was a place for it, and it was understood in a certain context, a certain way. We can't look back with our 21st century perspective and judge that. It's different. We have to be very careful of how we think about how these cultures were way back when or whatever. And that goes without saying for 100 years ago, Victorian England and so on. So the other important part of what I believe constitutes civic virtue is an educated citizenry familiar with not only the basics of its own country's laws, but understanding the structure of government, balance of power, and most significantly, why the most important laws are there to begin with. So, yeah, why? What's the point? Daddy, why? Why can't I keep a loaded gun under my pillow or whatever? So watch any number of First Amendment auditor videos that demonstrate the problem, particularly in urban cities. The auditors frequently encounter immigrants hired as loyal foot soldiers to the transnational corporations. These security guards, clerks, valets, etc., have no sense of respect for the country's civic virtues and quite proudly tread on the inalienable rights codified in the Constitution. And sometimes they have good reasons. So French people are worried that, people aren't, becoming French enough when they emigrate or whatever. Some people don't want to be French. They want to live in a more affluent country because in their country they might be killed or something. Or, it's just an intolerable way of life. But when they go to the West, they think the West is so decadent and ridiculous and grotesque compared to what their culture, what they're used to. They have no desire to be French. So maybe one or two generations down the line, then you have a really French Afghan or whatever, Syrian or African. And maybe this is not a hard and fast rule. You can't generalize about this, but the point has to be taken. So then he has a video of Louis C.K. With a typical modern leftist egalitarian thing. So you have to go to the article to see that. When books emphasizing the importance of key principles are no longer taught, and education in general is subverted beneath the noxious spume of an inimical culture, the end result is precisely this: a totally sickened, oblivious, agnotologically menticided, sorry, I'm not saying menticided all the time. I like to say omnicidal, but menticided is a new thing for me, but I like it. So you kill your mind, your brain. Class of Morlocks happily flinging feces as their beaming masters enslaved them. That's incredible. So I didn't read that too well, but this is a wonderful turn of phrase, I think. A totally sickened, oblivious, agnotologically mentis-sided class of Morlocks happily flinging feces as their beaming masters enslaved them. I don't know. That's pretty cool. So agnotology, another word I wasn't familiar with, so I looked it up. So within the sociology of knowledge, agnotology is the study of deliberate, culturally induced ignorance or doubt, typically to sell a product, influence opinion, or win favor, particularly through the publication of inaccurate or misleading scientific data, disinformation. More generally, the term includes the condition where more knowledge of a subject creates greater uncertainty. More knowledge, greater uncertainty. Stanford University professor Robert N. Proctor cites the tobacco industry's public relations campaign to manufacture doubt about the adverse health effects of smoking. This is a cool word for me, and I love the definition because I talk about the ignorati all the time. And I think the ignorati are suffering from this. So culturally induced ignorance or doubt, typically to sell a product, influence opinion, or win favor, particularly through the publication of inaccurate or misleading scientific data. But I also mean ignorati in the sense that once you're caught up in this agnotology, you become stubbornly, willfully ignorant. So you cling to certain information packets and shun all the others, thereby reducing your ability to educate your way out of a narrow, myopic worldview kind of thing. So that was pretty fun. But as is consistent with corporate media morals, the above article focuses on how to recalibrate Biden's messaging for a better victory prospect rather than how to fix the broken system itself. So, yeah, I mean, voters think America is broken. Biden needs to meet them where they are. You know, he's not the answer, people. These people, they don't mention any of this ever. They don't think about it. Their machine doesn't think about it. Their assistants and advisors don't think about it. Nobody's involved with this. It's a big game, right? It's a status game. It's a money game. It's a Powerball game. And they don't care about fixing anything. So behold the inane misguidedness of the final paragraph. Everything is broken, or so it feels to many of our fellow citizens. Defying this reality only empowers populist candidates whose message acquires its potency by pointing to an entrenched political establishment unwilling or unable to learn from or even admit its myriad mistakes. That shirking needs to stop, and it should do so with Joe Biden. That's a joke. You really think, the problems were caused by these people, these neoliberal idiots, fools, and their game. And they're not going to solve it. They're not going to fix it. It's not in their interest. They don't know anything about looking at things in a different way. They don't have that imaginative capacity. So thus, we acknowledge everything is broken, but let's figure out how to rebrand the establishment's image rather than acknowledge the populist candidates legitimately calling out the real issues, making sense. A perfectly encapsulation of everything that's wrong. So, are the hoi polloi too far gone, or can America and the West be saved? What do you think? Bulliam T. out.